So, the first thing we talked about was just basically what is a polynomial. Polynomial is a monomial or of a sum of monomials. Monomials, remember, are multiplication between variables and numbers. The exponent of the variable in a term is the degree, and the degree of the polynomial is the largest degree of one term. And so what we did with these polynomials functions is we put them in standard form. Remember, standard form is highest to lowest, and then we classified them based on their degree and by how many terms they had. And you want to simplify it as much as possible. So if you had two like terms, you would combine those first, because standard form would never have two like terms still there. So standard form would put it highest to lowest, and it would combine any like terms. So go ahead and put that in standard form. All right, so what is standard form here? What's first?
4x cubed.
Yeah, so you would start with your 4x cubed, and then what?
Plus 2x squared.
Plus your 2x squared. And then minus x, make sure you bring that negative, and then plus 3x. What's wrong here?
We have to minus 2.
What do we need to do? Yes. So these are like terms. So what I want to do is I want to replace that with what?
Plus 2x.
Plus 2x, right? So I'm going to have plus 2x. And that would actually be my standard form. So what's the degree here?
3.
3. What's my number of terms? 3. So what would this be?
A cubic trinomial.
Cubic trinomial. Cubic trinomial. The next thing we did in sections 2 and 3, we looked at some factor theorems. We looked at zeros. We looked at dividing polynomials with long division and dividing with synthetic division. And so we covered a lot in these two sections, all right? The factor theorem says that if you get a 0 as a remainder when you divide, then what you divided by is a factor, all right? Multiple zeros. This is where you can have, like in 17, 1 is a multiple 0 because it has a multiplicity of 2, okay? Zeros can appear more than once. Synthetic division is basically taking your coefficients and doing kind of a shortcut. One thing you have to remember with long division and with synthetic division is you must have all of your exponents going from highest to lowest. If you're missing one, you have to plug it in with a 0. All right. So number 13 wants you to write it in factored form. List the zeros and their multiplicity. All right. Number 17 wants you to write this in standard form. You have been given the zeros. The last two are dealing with division here. So number 21, use synthetic division to completely factor each polynomial, all right? And then 27 wants you to use synthetic and division and the remainder theorem to find substitution. So we call it synthetic substitution. So what would happen if you plugged that in, use synthetic division to figure that out as well. So go ahead and try those 4. All right, let's go through here. The first one, don't forget your common factors, which you take out first, and then factors of 12 that add up to give you -1, -4, and +3. That is your factoring. For the next one, they gave us our zeros. So if our 1 is a 0, our x minus 1 is our factor. So then this one would be x minus 1, this 2 would be x minus 2. And then I just FOILed. X minus 1 times x minus 1 is x squared minus 2x plus 1. Distribute your x minus 2. I distributed the x through. Then I distributed the -2 through and got this. And then I combined my like terms. For 21, divide, and I would not make you do both of them unless I specifically said divide this one using this way and that one using the other way. But this one I did synthetic. If you did long, that was fine. Either way, you started with 4. The degree of 4. My coefficient here was 1. And then I did not have a cubed. I did not have a squared, so I filled those in with zeros. My exponent of 1 had a coefficient of -1, and then my constant was a 2. And then you just add down. 1 and 0 is 1, multiply up, add down all the way across. And then you start with 1 lower than where you started. So I started with an exponent of 4. This is going to have an exponent of 3. So x cubed minus x squared plus x minus 2 plus 4 over x plus 1. This last one was synthetic substitution. What would happen if I plugged in a 1 is the same thing that would happen with my remainder if I did synthetic division. And so I just did synthetic division. My remainder was -9, which is your answer there. So in 6-4, we did not actually solve by graphing, but we did solve by factoring. All right, and so these were a little bit higher factoring, potentially x cubed, x to the 4th. And we also had to know our sum and difference of cubes for this one. So for 34, you're going to have to know your difference of cubes. For 37, you're actually just going to have to do basic factoring.
What was 37 supposed to be?
All right, so let's walk through these. This is your difference of cubes. You have to have this memorized. When you do a difference of cubes, the first one will be easy. You just set it equal to 0, you get a 2. This guy will always require the quadratic formula. When you have started with the difference of cubes, this part will always require the quadratic formula. So to solve this one, you have to use quadratic formula. In this case, we ended up with an imaginary and we simplified. And so here are my zeros. For this one, it's actually just basic factoring. Pull out your common factor. 4 and 1 add up to 5, set it equal to 0, and those are your answers there. The way I do it is I want you to state the total number of complex, the possible number of imaginary, the possible number of real, total possible, lists all the ones that are possible rational, and then you want to find your roots. And I will actually give you one when we do this, all right? So you want to list all your complex, your possible combinations of imaginary, real, and then your rational ones. And remember, rationals come from your constant and your leading coefficient. And then for this one, for number 44, so for this one, 44, one of your roots is -1. So I'll go ahead and tell you one of your roots here is going to be -1. So that is one of your roots. So go ahead and list your complex total, imaginary, real, all of your possible rational, and then find all of your roots based on the one that you've been given. Let's walk through all these actually. So complex is always going to be your degree, 3. Imaginary, you're going to start at 3 and do your even numbers going down from there. If it were 4, you would start with 4, 4, 2, 0. But since 3 is odd, we're going to start with 2, and then it can be 0 because they always come in pairs. For my real, they always have to add up to 3. So I just kind of use this as a guide. If this is 2, then I would have 1 real because that would add up to 3. If this is 0, then I would have 3 real, and that would add up to 3. Okay? Then my rational is going to be the factors of this over the factors of that. I gave you a 0 here, so then you're going to use synthetic division. If you get something other than a 0 in the remainder, you did your synthetic division wrong, right? Because I just told you it was a 0. And then you're going to, if you can factor, which obviously we could not, we tried, you would factor this. If not, you're going to use the quadratic formula. and get this. So you can double check. You can say, oh, no, don't do that. You can say, all right, 1, 2, 3. I have 3 zeros. 1 is real, 2 are imaginary. So it fits my criteria at the beginning as well. So the last thing we did in this chapter was permutation and combinations. Permutation is if order matters. Combinations is if order does not matter. And so then we also did probability of getting exactly this or exactly that. So try those and then we'll go over them. Walk y'all through that one. They want us to have a coin toss 7 times. So that's what the total number that I'm going to have. Probability of getting exactly 4. I am actually going to use 7 minus 4 here. So 7 things taken 3 at a time. And then 0.5 raised to what I want. That's because that's the probability of what I want. What I don't want raised to the leftover, which is 3. And you should get this 0.273 round to the nearest percentage is 27%.